Hello, and welcome to the ModeOne podcast in Discovery Mode. In today's episode, Ryan Frye, Chief Innovation Officer at ModeOne, is joined by Brett Burney, Nextpoint's eLaw Evangelist, to discuss why screenshots are inadequate for mobile collections and how legal teams can capture defensible, authenticated data without jumping straight to full forensic collection. Ryan and Brett walk through what a defensible middle ground could look like, something more comprehensive than screenshots without the cost and overhead of full forensic collection, while still preserving the visual presentation that attorneys, judges, and juries recognize. Let's get into it. Ryan, please kick us off.
Brett, good to see you again, man. It's always nice running into you at conferences and
always
crossing paths at industry events, etc. Well, it's crazy to think that it's 2026, but we're still talking screenshots. But, here we are, Brett. So thanks for joining and looking forward to the discussion on why screenshots are inadequate. So I was going to ask you, are you still dealing with screenshots? Are you talking clients off the ledge? Because if they were sufficient, we would kind of stop questioning them,
Right. Yeah. I don't know if it's so much that I'm talking them off the ledge of screenshots. I'm trying to tell them like, hey, you need to climb a little bit higher in your different solutions to collecting social media and from text messages, from mobile devices. I mean, more than anything else, because I feel like a lot of them, they come to me, right? And when I'm working with folks, it's usually, mid-sized and smaller firms. It's folks that may not be quite as comfortable or sophisticated in the technology side. And so they think, well, hey, I can do screenshots. I can capture stuff. I'm going to tell my client that's how we need to capture some of this information. And I look at them and say, I know that you think it's easy. I know that it can seem easy. Everybody has the ability to do screenshots. But when we start pulling in this requirement of, a full comprehensive collection, that includes the metadata, that includes the context, we need to make sure that it is as adequate as possible as you go down that line, from the sense of making sure that you have everything you need and that you can properly authenticate it down the road. A lot of people say, well, we can authenticate like a picture that somebody takes, because we'll have them come in and say, yes, I took the picture. And I get it. And there are some areas where maybe, possibly, potentially, a screenshot could be adequate, as long as you know that you're taking on a little bit of risks, not only for your own practice, but also for your clients, in having to make sure that you properly authenticate those screenshots that are taken, that you can show that there was the greater, the more comprehensive area in which it was collected and the process that it went through to collect all of that information. So often, right, I feel like I'm trying to make sure that they understand the more comprehensive picture here, as opposed to just, oh, well, that's just the easy way to do it. We'll just get them to do screenshots and we'll be fine. And more often than not, they're not going to be fine when it comes to a legal proceeding.
Yeah. No, Brett, I like that. So it's definitely kind of a spectrum of risk tolerance and feasibility. I mean, the way I think about it sometimes is just how often is a single screenshot from a single conversation all of the responsive or relevant messages? And I just, just would, just be so worn out if I had to take a ton of screenshots. Do I overlap the threads so I'm not missing anything? And now you've got duplicate messages and just, how is it in chronological order? How do I know you didn't miss anything?
Right.
How do I get, that's all before we even talk about metadata yet, and just the inconvenience of that would be out of control.
I always say, yeah, I like to tell people, it's like it becomes very bulky and cumbersome very quick. Like when I talk to folks about using screenshots, first of all, it's just not going to be 2 or 3. It's just, I think, Matt, your colleague has said before, like it's sort of a sore thumb syndrome there, right? Because you take a screenshot, you scroll up, take another screenshot, scroll up, take another screenshot, scroll up, take another screenshot, and you just keep going and going, rinse and repeat until where you've got potentially 50, 60, 80 different screenshots there that you have to literally glue together somehow. I mean, there's even apps available that I've recommended far in the past. I'm not going to mention it now because I don't think it's the best way to go, but there are apps that allow you to kind of stitch things together, so that it looks like it's one long, very, very long JPEG. I'm like, how are you going to show that? How do you share that around very easy? Again, There could be
Yeah.
some areas where maybe, possibly, potentially that could work, but it's just not going to be as effective and comprehensive as using a tool, like ModeOne, or frankly, even going all the way up the spectrum, if you will, to where you do a
Sure.
full forensic collection. Like that's one way to do it as well, right? But in that sense, I tell people there's just so many things that just aren't going to present themselves in the best way if you're doing from that screenshots. And it just gets a little ridiculous, to kind of glue all of that together and kind of help people understand like where this came from. And then you've got redactions on top of that. And then you've got like, well, there's a section here of this conversation that I really don't need, but I don't want to pull it out because then it looks like I'm hiding something because I didn't have it complete. Just all those questions that you can avoid if you're using some better tools for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, you mentioned forensic collections too. A lot of times you may
Right.
need to get access to those deleted messages, and that's a key thing. Your users can't see them, so they obviously can't screenshot those either. Yeah. No, that's good.
When I give CLE presentations on this topic, Ryan, a lot of times I say, here's the Brett Burney non-scientific spectrum of mobile collection. And on this far end, I have screenshots because it's quick, it's easy, it's cheap, obviously, and it could accomplish that duty to preserve, but it's not going to be anywhere near as comprehensive and helpful. On the other end of the spectrum is a forensic collection. It's going to be the most expensive, but it's going to be the most comprehensive. And you're typically having like a third party come in and do that for you, right? So you have that reliance on maybe an expert that you can talk to. But in the middle, there are some excellent tools today that people can use, and they're much better than just doing sort of that screenshot. And namely, obviously, ModeOne is one of them. That's why I've been a big fan of what you guys have been doing for a long time, because I know inevitably in just about every litigation today, we have to collect some type of mobile devices, and typically it's text messages more than anything else, as you well know. And being able to collect that and be able to target that and focus that a little bit better, along with all of the other information you need, such as the metadata, that can be just as important.
Yeah, exactly, Brett. I mean, that's absolutely right. A lot of times, our outputs will include the metadata for all the participants in a thread. That's very important if you're looking for
Yes.
key folks. And, sometimes ripping out who the active participants were, the people that contributed to the conversation can just help the review process too. And we all know I could look at a screenshot really quickly and maybe discern, is this Apple or Android or Google, right? Did this come from texting? Was it WhatsApp? But if all that's in metadata, then man, when an attorney says I need to look at all the conversations between Ryan and Brett from the last 2 years in
Right.
WhatsApp, you can do that so effectively in your review tool. So metadata is key. So that's a good point. Brett, have you ever seen anybody like in any of your AI discussions, has screenshots come up of like someone's going to nefariously generate a screenshot, right, with AI that shows a conversation? Like that's where my head goes next is just ways that we need to be hyper vigilant.
Yeah, absolutely. Doug Austin has the eDiscover Today blog, which is great. And he's covered actually a couple of stories that hit exactly on this, Ryan, to where somebody generated a text message, claiming that this was the response that they got maybe from an insurance company, or that somebody sent something. Actually, in one case, I specifically remember they claimed that it was sent at a certain date, but on the date that they claimed that it was sent, the emojis that were used didn't match up with that version of the iOS, the operating system on that phone. So you could get even caught in some of those things like that. But all they had at that point was a screenshot. And of course, it was a doctored, quote, screenshot. It wasn't even really a screenshot. They just created this image, right? But not having that metadata was just, I think that could have helped in that case if they were able to do that. And of course, as you mentioned with AI today, I mean, I kind of chuckle every time that I see people, AI generating receipts for expense reports. I'm like, man, I'm just going to be able to get all kinds of stuff back. But it's so easy today to generate those kind of things, whether it's, printed receipts that you submit for your work, or, even from, conversations that didn't really happen, and be able to present that. But, as you well know, Ryan, there's all kinds of telltale signs, as if it's not just exactly perfect, and you can tell if it's not a screenshot. And, having some of that additional information, again, is just so important. The context.
It is. Brett, I worked a case as an expert about 10 years ago, and there was little things when they were falsifying screenshots that would catch my attention. It would be like AT&T was the network, but they're a Verizon subscriber, it's because they took a stock image and they inserted a few bubbles.
Exactly.
We've had issues with validating the contacts, right? A screenshot will say it's Ryan and Brett, but what was the phone number that Ryan was communicating with?
Yep.
Was that actually Brett, or was that Rocky? You know what I mean? And so all of a sudden, you don't have that underlying source data that your screenshot is alluding to. You can't validate that this is actually with that other person. So I've seen some fun things. And Verizon has changed along the ways too. They used to be VZW. We've seen just changes in acronyms, different iOS versions. So you'd have to be pretty smart to say, all right, 2 years ago, this is what my screenshot should have looked like if I was really texting. So lots of ways to poke holes on this at scale. And you've got so many apps out there that we have to deal with and be experts on. Yeah, you're right. Bring the right tool when you need to.
Hey, Ryan, so I got a quick question for you, though, because I can imagine some people listening to this, and I get this question. If you say screenshots aren't adequate most of the time, but, so maybe think about a forensic collection. But there's something to be said from the visual component, too, Ryan. I know that you guys deal with this, right? Because some attorneys will tell me that screenshot looks exactly the way that we would expect it to look, right? You've got your green and blue bubbles, as you were talking about. A judge or a jury would recognize that immediately. Whereas if I tell people to do a forensic collection, a lot of times, there's various ways that you can do an export out of a forensic collection if you use Celebrite or something, right? But often it comes as sort of just a very long, text version, right? So you don't get to see the emojis or that kind of a thing. I would just, maybe you could talk to that just a little bit, because the screenshots also aren't going to show if it's an animated GIF or emoji, that kind of a thing. It's just going to be a static image, and being able to collect that. The forensic image may be something that is overwhelming to folks, but I know that there are some other good alternatives for that.
Yeah, absolutely, Brett. So, I think ModeOne sits right in that middle zone there too, where our decades of experience dealing with these types of these issues went into building the product, right? And so we've been working together for several years now. It's been great to get Nextpoint's feedback on what we can do to improve. And I think a lot of things that we've done, collective experience combined, has been making sure that our PDF outputs are those colored bubble views that you'd expect. You put that in front of a witness or a custodian, right? And in a deposition, and they're going to say, that looks like my phone. That was really our primary goal, was to do that. And that includes color emojis, because as you know, there's the emoji wiki out there, the emoji dictionaries. We've heard all about all the fun things, but interpretation from device to device too. So that was important to us to make sure we have a always current, latest library of emojis. And then just ensuring we have the hash matching native attachment as well. So that, like you said, if I don't embed a video, you can't embed a 2-minute video in a static PDF, but I can sure tie that together as a family and put that thumbnail that's actually viewable from the PDF, right? It's not a real tiny version, but it's not a 3-page version. It's a nice soft in between to more represent on what you see on your phone, right? You do sort of get that experience on your phone as well. So I know that's one of the big formats that you guys take from us a lot, quite a bit.
Right.
And clearly it's working well since your clients have given us great feedback as well. Well, Brett, what do you want to wrap with?
Well, I would just say, make sure before you just assume that screenshots are going to be the easiest and quickest way to get that information, that you look out there for some of the alternatives. I would just say, just make sure that you take a beat and reach out to somebody an expert that you trust, that you can just say, is there a better way to do this? And yes, it might cost just a little bit more. It might take a little bit more time to do this, but it's going to be worthwhile if this is an important consideration from collecting some mobile information. It's important to make sure you get it in the context, you get it so that it's comprehensive, and you get the metadata that you need, so that obviously this is going to work out so much better for you down the line in a litigation matter.
That's awesome. That's right, Brett. What feels fast today is often, expensive tomorrow. So I think we're aligned there. Yeah, awesome. Well, when am I going to see you next? Am I going to see you in New York here in March?
Yeah, this is beginning the conference season, right? So I know you guys will be at Legal Week, probably in New York. We're going to have ABA Tech Show coming up in March. Just lots of fun things. And, the University of Florida eDiscovery Conference, lots of things going on.
Great. Awesome, Brett. Well, thanks for joining today and looking forward to seeing you again in person.
Thanks, Ryan. Always fun.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In Discovery Mode. Follow us on LinkedIn for updates on new episodes or visit us online at www.modeone.io.